Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is the art of creating multi-platform narratives. On this session, I have the immense pleasure of having three filmmakers who I've had the privilege of knowing prior. The first one being the wonderful Krishna Menon, whose two films genuinely inspired me and changed my life. One being Airlift, which I think I've seen about 15 odd times. And the other one, this really small, sweet, I mean, it was not small in terms of the actors that it had, but the idea was something that was extremely small, and it hit exactly where it hurt the most, and that was the heart. And that's a film called Chef. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think this gentleman needs any introduction. He's delivered some of the finest films to this country. The last one being an extremely engaging film called Pippa. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Krishna Menon. Yeah. The second filmmaker who we have amidst us is someone I've had the privilege of knowing in a very long time again. He's always pushed the boundary with every single thing that he's ever done. Be it the films that he creates, be it the music that he creates, or be it the experiences as someone who has the fortune of knowing him that he puts you through. When it comes to an Indian context, he really is the man who's taking Transmedia in its truest, bluest form to the next level. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Q. Our third filmmaker is nothing short of a firecracker. I've actually known her from the time she started curating short films across multiple platforms to today leading one of the largest franchises called Student of the Year onto the third part of the film. She's not just a filmmaker, she's far more than just a filmmaker. She's a curator, she's an artist, she's an advertising executive in terms of running her own outfit. She's also a filmmaker. She's an multifaceted human being and genuinely one of the most exciting filmmakers to look forward to in 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, Reema Maya. I'm going to jump straight in. All three of you are amazingly enough working on respective transmedia projects. If you could start with that and tell us a bit about what you're doing currently.
Check. Yep. Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks for that introduction. It's amazing to be here and talk about transmedia. It's still in its nascent stage, I think. So it's good to start talking about these things early so that at least, we start building the foundations. So to be honest, the idea of what I'm working on right now, didn't start off as a transmedia project at all. It's a bit of a, kind of a hit or a miss in terms of being a transmedia project. It actually started off when we were trying to tell this story, which was kind of an eco story that's also kind of, it's a drama, but it has an element of sci-fi in it. It's set in a world that was completely built by us. And so when we started building this world, we started seeing it. The writer actually came from comics. And so he always kind of, when we were writing this together, he would always kind of go back into his foundation, which is comics, right? And, we'd keep talking about it. And so it began there. And then as we are developing the story, we realized that we've created a world which was being limited by the idea of a feature film, or even if there were sequels, 2 or 3 films, it didn't matter. It was still limiting us in terms of the width and the depth to which we could go. Which as we started working at that point, honestly, I hadn't heard the word transmedia. Okay, so I didn't know what the hell it was. Cross media, maybe, because you're trying to be in different mediums. And so then, as we developed it, I realized that we had stumbled upon transmedia, actually, because what we were doing was we were building character depths, which you would often leave on the table when you make a feature film script, right? You kind of backstories, whatever we may call it. And suddenly I realized, hey, there's space now for this backstory to become content in itself on a certain media, right? Where we can actually have interactions with live, real people, and they can bring in their points of view into this character and then kind of go deeper, and then you can go wider, right? So what I think was the most exciting part for me about Transmedia was the fact that suddenly something which was limited to kind of a director's medium suddenly became democratized. It kind of opened up and went much wider and deeper and actually started getting people into it, right? So you either bring people into that world, or you can bring that world into their lives in some way, right? So that was the exciting part for me. It's very, 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 very difficult, very, very tedious.
You still haven't given us any details of what is it that you're doing.
Sorry?
I said you still haven't given us any details of what is it that you're doing.
Well, like I said, it's too early for me to actually talk about the project itself. It's too early to talk about it. But I'll tell you this. I mean, it takes me a couple of years to write a script. I have no idea where I'm going to be in 5 years with this thing. It's like, it's also because I'm not a tech guy. So I don't completely. I'm also not even on social media. So I'm beginning to try and understand. I think this year I've got to come back onto social media to understand just for this project. But because the engagement is so different on each of these mediums, right? To even begin to understand that, I think the foundation of that is this world that you create, right? So mythology. Like for instance, if you look back, I think the greatest transmedia out of India is probably the Ramayana and Mahabharata. Right, it's a cross. You can use. You have 1,000 characters you can build on, right? Star Wars, for instance, does that, right? Like you can build these things. You can interact. You can have your perspective. Again, characters who are not good or bad or all gray. So just wonderful depth to it and the spread. So that really is the exciting part. It's hard. It needs a lot of discipline. It's going to take someone to train people to write this stuff from the beginning, but exciting.
Q? You're working on something exciting in Calcutta.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm from Calcutta, and as we all know, Bengal is longer, Calcutta is no longer a metro city. Bengal is no longer an important economic state. Our industries have crashed. Everything is, what. But that gives us a great leverage to experiment. And one of the things that I've always found myself drawn to is music. As you know, well, most of my films are actually musicals, and I started out filmmaking because we never had money to make the music. So if I got the money to make the film, I would be able to make the music. From this counterpoint to now, I see this development. All my friends have bands, and they're pretty big there. They're big artists. However, when you see a Divine here or in Bombay or even a Chardiwari, and you see the Bengali bands, you see that it's a real huge divide between the quality standard and the economics. The quality standard is very high in Bengal, but the value proposition is almost negligible. So I have this friend who has a band called Fossils. And Fossils is the biggest Bengali rock band. They've been at it for 23 years now, and they make these huge shows, 10,000 people and all that, but they don't even have a fan database. And when they reached out to me saying that we are bringing out an album, can we do something? I immediately thought that, the age of video is gone. How I've been following Deutsche and Doja Cat and Weekend's new experiment with the cinema. Even worked on my friend Anik Khan, who's a Brooklyn-based rapper. His new release, which has a cinematic universe around it. And I began to realize that there could be cinema for the music, and I started developing this idea, which now we are funding at a funding stage, and we are hoping to complete it by New Year, Bengali New Year, which is 14th of April. So we've given ourselves a very, very strong, unlikely turnaround time, which is actually because kids are just shooting and posting. We are competing with that. That turnaround time is, and now if you put in critical thinking in between, how much time will that take and how quickly can you turn around? So this is a proposition where we tell a story which spans these 20 years of the band's existence. The band's music forms the soundtrack of eventually what will become a feature film. However, we are going to bring it out as episodic elements across 3 platforms. 2005, the story comes out on Facebook, 8 episodes. 2015, it comes out on YouTube, 7 episodes. And 2025 comes out on Instagram, 15 episodes. Each episode has different durations depending on the algo. And every story is curated to fit that platform. However, after we've dropped 31 episodes, we take them all off and come back with a feature film which is non-linear. This is the idea at this point of time, and hopefully we'll find takers enough to make this happen.
Supremely exciting.
Check. Yeah. Wow. Everyone's doing such fascinating things. I'm glad you brought up the music industry. I feel like as a filmmaker, I feel like I come more from the independent music scene in India than from the independent film scene. This is because when I started my company, which is called Catnip, I started it in the independent music scene. We were only doing music-oriented video content. We were doing a lot of music videos. You mentioned Divine. He did a song called Bazigar. That music video was done by me. Bunch of other artists like Pratik Kohad and Ritviz and stuff. And that's a completely different perspective. I also have done a lot of advertising work, which is also completely different perspective, different part of your brain works there. I've done 2 independent short films that both premiered at Sundance and went to a lot of festivals.
And won.
And won a bunch of awards. But thanks, guys. So that takes, again, a completely different mind. And now, of course, I'm headlining Student of the Year 3, but as a series and as my sort of reimagination of the franchise. So it's been really interesting. I feel like as a filmmaker, I've been sort of simultaneously functioning in various different media pathways, and so the idea of transmedia, I think, comes very naturally to me. And I think the reason for that is that I didn't become a filmmaker out of a sense of romanticism for the big screen. I became a filmmaker because I felt this really annoyingly strong urge to say a lot of things, and then I figured, okay, what is the best form in which I can have these conversations? And of course, films made a lot of sense because they have this really strong capacity to influence people, right? People are looking at it, doing silly things like copying hairstyles and copying ways of dressing. It's such a strong sense of social validation. And I feel like that is why I chose films to be my medium of choice. But every time I get an idea, the first question always is, what is the correct form of this, right? What is the best experience in order to land the impact of what I really want to say through it? What is my perspective on it? And if I feel it should be a recipe, then it should be a recipe. If it should be a photograph, it should be a photograph. If it is a story that needs the canvas of a feature film, then it should be that. If it needs the canvas of a series, then it should be that. I feel like that's how I started approaching the idea of visual expression. And I deliberately didn't go to film school. And I did a course called Contemporary Media Practice at the University of Westminster, which was really more about a lot of convergent media, a lot of transmedia, tangible computing, really interesting stuff like this. And this is like way back. So I graduated in 2012, just before, thankfully everything went very digital and life was good. But it was a very, conscious decision to be in a space which is very digital first, where I experiment a lot with mixed media and with convergent media, which is kind of the converse of transmedia, right? In transmedia, you take one story and one idea and you expand it into multiple mediums. I was experimenting with how do you take ideas from different mediums and you bring it together into visual storytelling. Like, for example, there's an amazing artist called Pratik Kohad. Way back, he had a song called Tum Jab Paas that I was doing the music video for. And it was, of course, we were both independent artists with not a lot of money. So we were trying to figure out what do we do and how do we tell this love story in a very frugal way. And then the idea was to take the aesthetics of still life photography and then use it for narrative storytelling. So it's been a really fun, I think, journey. And now the two main projects that I'm working on are transmedia in a different way, which is, of course, Student being like a series from a film's franchise, and another project that I can't talk about, but it's again like a smaller exploration of a larger sort of cinematic universe in the sci-fi
No one
space.
in this room will tell anyone. Tell us.
But it's just like a science fiction cinematic universe, and I'm being able to again explore the backstory of one character and really go deep and create my own sort of sub-version of, the main story that everyone has experienced and loved.
I mean, you brought up a really interesting point. We have this saying, and with all of you as filmmakers and also writers, and some of you are producing your own stuff. Actually, all three of you are producing your own stuff as well. The statement is that the director is the captain of the ship. Now, when it comes to a transmedia scenario, essentially you're working with multiple creative teams. How difficult or easy is it to be the captain of a ship when you have multiple creative teams and not necessarily you might be the master of each of those particular mediums? So when it comes to gaming, or when it comes to comic books, when it comes to merchandising, right? How easy or difficult is it?
Well, I mean, we finally still come down to narrative. That's one person. It has to be. I mean, I tell everybody that my world is a democracy, but I'm an autocrat. Right? So I'm happy to listen to everything. I'm going to make the call. Right? Because otherwise, you're just going to be going down, these paths which there's no right path. There's just a path, right? Which works for you. You can listen to people, and of course, it's a collaborative art. But finally, if you really want it to come out, it needs to be one person's vision. Now, it'll be the same thing. So, like for instance, gaming, it's not my world, right? But when I talk to people who are building the game. I'm still controlling the narrative of they may tell me that, okay, hey, we need it to be more, you need more participation. You need to be able to leave, clues, or you need to be able to get people into the game so that they can continue. But the narrative, so the structure will change, the way that they program it will change, the way that it works changes. But essentially, the core world that I've created is still the world that I have created, or me and whoever has worked with me. So the world and the characters will be built like that, right? Like, so for instance, only perspective, right? Like, I mean, I remember a long time ago, this tremendous filmmaker out of Kerala, M.T. Vasudevan Nair, he made a film which was from the perspective of a villain in Kerala, which always been a villain in folklore. And then he changed the perspective. This is the beginning of this thing, right? Suddenly, when you start looking at people, so that if that were a game and there was the villain's perspective, that perspective would also be driven by one person. But you know what I mean? So I think working with people that's primarily what we do as filmmakers. I mean, on average, you're talking to 300 people and then trying to bring them all on a set and get one shot done. So,
True. Sorry, did either of you have anything to add? Because I have a follow-up question to this. Okay. So in which case, who gets access to the full story? because on a film set, my actor knows, my ADs know, everyone on set knows what my story is. But in a transmedia context, and when you guys, and primarily all three of you are developing something, who has access to that entire story? Because it's not just that one particular medium, it's across multiple mediums. And as the captain of the ship, you're pretty much the only person who knows exactly what my entire narrative is.
So what I think is it's not so definitive in what I'm doing. This is I'm learning on the go, so I might be completely wrong. But what I find is that what we're creating now is we're creating worlds. So we create this, which is why mythology works, for instance, right? We're creating a mythology, right? Whichever that, whether it's present day or whatever. So you're creating a world, then you populate that world with characters, and like oftentimes the character will tell you what it's going to do, right? And that character is driven by the player, for instance, in a game, right? So when it has endless possibilities of where it'll go. So what what I'm trying to learn now is that I don't control the narrative as much as I used to, because in film, largely I'm asking you to watch something the way I want you to watch it, which is my perspective. It's my story. I'm telling you that this is good, this is bad, this is grey, this is whatever it might be, right? Largely. And I'm giving you a little bit of leeway to bring your perspective into it, right? Unlike, for instance, maybe when you read a book, where your imagination is allowed to be more interactive with the book. Now we're reaching a point where you're basically letting these characters free. So you put the four of us in this room, and somebody there is driving the questions you ask, or because that's how they drive it. So I think that the first thing I'm trying to learn here is how to shed what I've learned as a narrative filmmaker. As it is.
I think another thing about narrative filmmaking is you are taught to think in a linear manner, right? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's also like your job as a good director is to really micro direct the viewer's audience's experience and attention. But the moment you open it up to these worlds in gaming, for example, you have to relinquish that control. So you have to think, instead of linear, you have to think laterally and spatially. And it's a very fun exercise to see how you can retrain and rewire your mind as an artist to do that. So yeah, and I think about collaborators, I think the toughest part of being a director is to find the right collaborators. It's frustrating most of the time. Still, you find the gems, right? And I've realized that it really excites me to get perspectives from people who are already from different fields. For example, one of my writing assistants, she's a writer, but she's also primarily a visual designer. So her mind very naturally works in like a comic format. Or my writing assistant on the sci-fi project, who writes a lot for games, and he actually runs this tabletop role-playing game club, like Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff, right? So he's, again, incredible. Guys, TTRPGs, big community, definitely check it out. A lot of role-playing in a narrative way. So it's so exciting because he's so used to being in a room full of people and taking them to this imaginative place. So it's a game, but it's happening in real time, right? So again, his perspective on the story and the characters and the way they should be introduced is so drastically different from my perspective. So I think it's very interesting to actually choose collaborators who are from very different fields so that they can supplement your vision or broaden how much you know, because there's so much information you can't possibly. I will never know as much about TTRPG games as Shubham does, right? So I think that's a really like a fast way to expand your universe and start thinking in very, very different ways and make even linear storytelling and narrative work more exciting and more gamified, because I think life has become gamified right now. So even like traditional filmmaking doesn't work anymore because there is this subconscious need to just gamify everything.
Q, is that the same for you as well in terms of your process?
Yeah, I would just actually add something funny to this, that yes, the collaborator, finding the right collaborator, right? And as a head of the department, right? That's who you're looking for. Okay, and in the cinematic world, the crew is set to accept that, right? The problem really that I faced over the last 4 years as I'm trying to transition from pure film into more transmedia and be dependent on techies, techies are not interested in anything. Okay? They are not interested in you. And for us, that's crisis, right? We are attention hungry people, okay? And I'm like, suffering because these techies don't want to listen to the story. They're not interested in the story. I give them bullet points of what you have to do. I'm like, dude, how do we solve this issue? And then I realized that, or it organically so happens, that film का कीड़ा जो है ना, वो हर एक डोमेन में मिलता है. हाँ, तो अभी I tried to search for that. Failed filmmakers who become techies. And believe me, those are the people who got it. So currently I'm actually working on this project with someone who's handling the tech. He's a filmmaker and he somehow thinks that through this association, he will be able to make films. I'm like, dude, films are not working, which is why I'm working with you, and maybe we could do something else together, and that's really exciting that a very sort of sideways, left-centered relationships are happening.
That's quite interesting because, both of you touched upon a topic which is collaborators. We function in an industry wherein there's a lot of fans that are generated. And I'm actually taking on from something that Mishal, who was moderating the earlier session with Sanjay ji and Vasuji, who also here, brought up, which is how do you deal with fan reactions towards your original story? Especially in a transmedia context, or sequels or changing platforms from, say, a series to a film, does a reaction of a fan or an audience member then affect you in terms of what you're then going to develop?
Can I take this? Okay. So in this case, the project that I'm working on, Fossils, has a fan base of around 2 million. They don't have anybody's data, right? It's a purely one-way communication channel where the fans really love their music and the musician doesn't even know the fan. So what we are trying to do is come up with a fan, or let's say a super fan engagement platform. And a very simple home for this is WhatsApp, because in India, everyone's on WhatsApp. And WhatsApp has a KYC built in. So what we are trying to do is to use an agentic AI to have these conversations with the fans. Because you need periodic conversations, systematic and sustainable conversations. And these conversations are not simply existing in a silo. They are assisting you to come with the band or the asset itself, the produce, maybe a film or an artist. It works best because fans engage with people, right? Fans are fans of people, not of a particular film, but the person. And then this relationship has to be watered, has to be nourished. How to nourish this and how to bring the audience closer to the artist without the artist having to do this take on this massive workload. Anyway, artists are really struggling. Instead of just making music, now they have to make reels, now they have to be this, that, and the other. So they're already suffering. If we introduce the system of the AI being trained to work on behalf of them, then this communication line is developed and utilized. And then you can look at merchandising, you can look at all the other possibilities of transactional engagements that can happen with the fans, thereby adding a much more value to the chain that the artist produces.
So, I mean, that's amazing, actually. I think AI agents are going to play a big part in these engagements for sure. But I think if I went back philosophically, as a filmmaker or as people, as creators, we felt a strong ownership of our content, right? And so we have created a certain character in a certain way, and we've created an ego of that character, right? And then that gets deflated when someone comes in and says, people react. Why is this character behaving like this, right? You know, he or she or they would not do this, whatever it might be, right? I think that's changing dramatically the moment you go transmedia, because you've relinquished ownership, right? So once you relinquish ownership, then that character is living vicariously through each person's own imagination, right? So you have to let that go, which is again, it's hard. It's hard.
Especially for filmmakers, I'm sure it's
For us,
even
yeah,
that
yeah.
much more
I'm
hard.
sure young people
That
are
is
just
your
letting it
baby.
go. Too old now, man. Yeah, gaming people don't care.
I mean, I think what you're doing with creating communication with the fans is fascinating, and it's actually really empowering, because obviously the fans in this case are the audience, and no one actually bothers to talk to them, you know, in the industry, which is really bizarre. And your entire life as a filmmaker is governed by people's completely like random figments of imagination of what some entity called an audience wants, you know. So you'll go in with an idea and they're like, no, we want something that works with the tier 2 audience, but they've never actually gone and spoken to a real person from a tier 2 city and asked them what they feel and what their perspective is. And what happens is, obviously we're disrespecting our audiences massively, but also as filmmakers we are constantly limited, because it's all commerce and it's all algorithms. And like, especially if you're, you know, when you're making something for a theatrical release, of course it's audience ko kya pasand aayega. When you're making something for a platform, it is within the first 10 minutes you have to hit this. After the first episode there will be big drop off if people last till the third episode. It's like that. It's very, very like metric driven. And I feel like the moment you say, okay, pause for a second, whoever you think is the audience, imagine one real person that you actually know from that demographic, and now think only about that person, of how they would react to the story, and then the conversation starts changing. So this is an incredible step towards real conversations and engagements with our audience, and everyone should do it.
I think you're absolutely right. And so one of the things that I'm also doing is there's a feature film that I'm working on right now. And I've actually...
Name.
Not yet. Too many jinxes, man. Wait. So, for the first time in my career, I'm actually working on a transmedia marketing plan, right? Which is actually, as it develops, it's as much marketing as it is getting people to tell you largely kind of how they feel. Right, not to change this, because I'm still old school like that. I think this film should be the film that you want to make, and what you're saying, because I don't think any algorithm or any data can tell you what people want. They can tell you what they saw before. They can tell you what happened in the past. AI can't write a future script. It can tell you it can take all of their old scripts and make that the best version of that maybe, but not beyond that. So I still old school that way. I think that it has to come from the human brain, and it has to come from your life experiences. But what happens when you can begin to see, first of all, you can see this in cheap, because it starts off really early. And if you're listening to what's coming out from there, it definitely guides you in terms of making it just finessing stuff better.
I think I'll just add to your point, actually, this that audiences are looked at as a blob of data, right? And as you start disassociating from that and looking at them as individuals, it becomes really tough to handle all this information. And that's where technology can play a big part, right? Because no human can actually do that, right? David Bowie did not know his fans, but somehow musicians have a much closer physical relationship with their fans because they perform live. You know, whoever performs live, immediately you get this connection, and you always remember that evening, something happened that evening. So from the fans' perspective, there's interactivity, there's something to take back. And the most important factor in this is that slowly, if we can develop this chain, and if you have a sizable audience that you communicate directly to, then imagine the distribution opportunities there. Like what Doichi built. He talks to her fans and only makes for those people. It doesn't go out anywhere else, you know. And that's something that we must aspire to, which has already started in the world. But the But in America, it works in a very different way. We have to find our own language for this, and also the tech help and the support system that is required, the economic support system to actually make these experiments. Because experiments have to fail, and this is something that we struggle in India with, especially.
Very, very emotional topic. Oh my
Yes.
God. Firstly, I was so excited to come here because so rarely do you actually get a chance to pause and think about innovation and the future, because you're constantly, put into boxes, dragged down to the lowest common denominator and things like that. So this is actually really exciting, and no progress can be made without experimentation. And I don't know. I mean, there aren't any existing spaces that allow you to do that. It's a constant fight, right? Like, I feel like good filmmaking has now become, how do you deal with all the market factors and still be able to make something compelling against all odds? That's really the definition of good filmmaking now.
No, I mean, bang on. I'm on my second last question, I promise. You spoke about innovation. As filmmakers, at what point do you consider a particular innovation on a particular platform or a medium a distraction?
Expand the question.
So say, for example, you spoke about community engagement and wanting to hear back from an audience. At what point do you say that, yes, I'm happy to listen to all of this? And at what point do you say that, no, now you're distracting me from what I actually want to do?
Sorry, please.
Yes, comments on social media and Reddit threads have gone too far, is my answer.
I think what's happening now is it's actually about understanding the information, right? Unfortunately, what happens is it's like in the old days you had a group discussion, right? And the loudest voice won, right? So you have 8 people sitting in a room, and this one person passionately is like, that's not how it should be. And then all the others, the bias, right, is standard. I mean, the research and hundreds of studies about how this bias happens. And then everyone joins in, right? So what happens is there are these biases, even if it's on Reddit or social media or whatever it may be. And until you're at the point to understand, what is the point at which I can actually take this out to people? Because we are evolving, right? We are also evolving first. Now, if it's premature, you don't allow it to evolve to where it potentially can, then you've destroyed everything. Because, we are extremely insecure people, at least I am, for sure, right? When I'm writing, I'm scared that somebody will read it. I'm hiding my writing from people. I don't want anyone to see it. The first time we've all shown our films, the first time, I'm out of the room. I'm not in the building. I I don't want to meet anybody after that. And then, you're scared, right? And 20 minutes before that, you just think you made the greatest piece of art, right? So it's scary to be judged because we're constantly judged, right? And it's so easy. You can put in 5 years of work, and rightfully so also, and someone just comes in and says, what is this crap, right? It's, right, you have to accept it. But when that comes in early, it destroys the potential for you to reach where you can reach. So I think what's really important is to understand, and this sounds self-serving, creative needs to be protected, man.
You're very optimistic.
Hope. We wouldn't be here if we weren't.
I'm on the opposite end of the spectrum. That's the idealism that I aspire for. But the reality of it is, I've realized, like last week, that I'm sitting on a bank of 24 ideas and stories that I've not made yet. And I had this huge existential moment of like, even if I count 2 years per project, I will probably die before I make all of them. So now I'm like, you know what? Just put it out. Like, try your best, give yourself a deadline, try your best within that space, and then just put it out, because it's more important for people to experience it than for you to perfect it. But this is all with a baseline of like good craft.
No, I agree with that. I'm not denying. I would procrastinate for years and never make a film if I could, right? Like, fortunately, I can't live like that. So, I need to pay the rent. So, at some point, you bite the bullet. I don't mean that. I just mean that even within that, there's a certain point at which you can put stuff out. It's like the first idea, right? We were talking about it in the room earlier, right? The amount of stream of consciousness writing I end up reading on a daily basis, right? Like people who just, hey, I have a story. Everybody has a story, and rightfully too. and then they type this thing out without thinking about what it is, and you end up reading. See, that's not the time. I mean, that's what I mean.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Take it to the
It's
next.
incredibly
You
frustrating.
know, it happened right here, distraction. Distraction is mainstreaming right now, right? That is the media narrative. Distraction in the post-truth world, distraction is real, right? So I think we need to wake up to that. As traditional artists and storytellers, it is imperative that we use distraction as a narrative tool.
Yep.
People are going to get distracted. Distract them then. You know, Trump is teaching us every day.
We'll hold that thought. We'll hold that thought. On that note, I'm going to open the floor for questions. Anyone has any questions? Sure. Can we get a mic here, please?
Hi, this is so entertaining. We are in a transmedia world also because there's a second screen viewing now where, famously people are watching on the big screen, on the TV, and on their phones, which is the second screen. And I feel like either you can call it distraction or, like Q says, use that as the ultimate disruption. So have you thought of that in the way you're writing things? Because often now people are saying that, no, I mean, we need to explain the storyline much more because there's second screen, people are watching this, they need to hear the story. So it's almost like you're making a podcast often when you're writing a sort of narrative story. So does that affect the way
It boils my blood to no end to be told as a director that you need to change your storytelling to be second screen friendly. For those of us who don't know, second screen friendly is they're like, okay, when people watch this work of art that you have invested so much of your blood, sweat, and tears in, please assume that they are constantly on their phone while they are watching it. And now adapt your work to the fact that they are completely distracted. And you sit in these meetings and you're just like, how are you supposed to react to this feedback? It's bizarre. And it's bizarre that we're living in a world where, I mean, I don't think we should slow down and spell it out and add a voiceover and do 100 things like this. I think we should do the opposite and make like such relentlessly engaging work that they forget the phone exists, that they cannot look away. Just be like, bombard them with storytelling. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think the idea that you are the second screen and therefore we need to explain everything is a very lazy, kind of like executive idea, I think. I mean, it's like, hey, no, the idea should be how do we become the first screen, right? Like in that sense, let's do stuff where you can't get disengaged, because if you do, then I don't know what's going to happen next. So I have to be engaged, right, and see what's going on. I need to be there. And by this idea of kind of dumbing it down, I mean, I see now, right? In the old days, we used to laugh about the films where the guy wore a stethoscope and he came and said, my name is Dr. Vijay, I am a doctor and I will cure you of whatever, right? And we used to laugh about it, right? Now we're back there. Not only do you have to say it, you have to show it and you put a super on top, right? Otherwise, apparently, nobody gets it, which is nonsense, which is complete nonsense. I've been told, I mean, on a different note, constantly from when I started making my first film, which is decades ago, that you as filmmakers think audience get the little stuff they don't. This is only for you. It's all your own personal stuff. And every time I've added stuff purely for myself into a film, 80% of the people watching the film have come out and got it. So we've been underestimating our audience forever. We continue to underestimate our audience. Well, if you make content that, I agree, pacing has to change because people have got used to, the engagement levels have changed differently. So yeah, we can do stuff like that. You can make it, it does not mean, I mean, just case in point to me was, there's a film which I think a lot of people, I don't know how many, but it's a film called Drishyam that came out some time ago with Mohan Lal in it. And when I was watching the film, it was after the hype of the film. It had already been hyped into this big hit. And so I was expecting some like really high-paced thing. And the first half went by and Mohan Lal does nothing in the first half. He sits down and watches TV. Right? He does nothing. He's just watching. He's a movie fan. He just watches movies. This is what he does through the entire hour or so, right? This became the biggest hit in Malayalam ever. So who's to say that, what people want, right? So the second screen viewing is the television equivalent, right? Which is that, the old Saas Bahu series kind of thing which goes on, right? Where people, they already watch something, they like this little bit of some noise in the background, and that's okay. But I don't think you can write for that. I don't think you should be writing for that, because if you could, maybe, I don't know, you didn't be a genius to write for that.
I actually think that we should write for that and control it, right? So Netflix should involve an AI that the phone gets to know and that you're watching this and knows that what you like, what you'll get distracted by, shows you the distraction, brings you back to this scene.
Ultimate
scary enough
Transmedia.
already.
This is the ultimate
Simple.
Transmedia.
It's so simple.
This is the best idea, man, ever.
I have the best idea.
Thank you. That is the best idea.
Do we have another question?
Yeah.
Please.
You all have such a like a vast body of work from so many decades. My question is, if you were to start now, and since the storytelling platform have like diversified and have like changed like so much, you started with cinema, you started with the music video and short film. So if you were to start now, so which platform would you take? Would it be social media? Because so many content creators are making money more than filmmakers and film actors. So it's become like a difficult choice. So for you personally, if you were to begin now at this age, at like 25, 26, what would be the platform and what would be the narrative that you will choose now?
I think one of the coolest things about what's happening now is that there's a freedom from which making these choices, right? Because the choice is made for you. So the story tells you whether it should be a 20-second, post, or it should be a reel, or it should be a story, or whether it should be a short film. And they all have potential distribution, right? Like I mean, forget about the making the money, not making the money is never going to drive the format you use or it should not drive the story you tell, technically. I mean, at least that's what I think. But I think that right now we have so many options, right? It could, when I started, it was very simple. If you wanted to make a feature-length film, if I remember right, it was 83 minutes or 93 minutes was the minimum length that kind of qualified it as a feature. If it was less than that, it was short. But you couldn't make 60 minutes because it was neither here nor there. So your short had to be 20 minutes. We were stuck to 2-3 formats, right? So, we were limited by that, and therefore we took this 60-minute idea and stretched it to 83 or vice versa, whatever way, right? Today, I think the content, the beauty of it is it needs to engage, which we've already established and discussed. But the length of it and where you tell it is completely opened up now. So it really will talk to you. So if the story, again, I'm old school, so I believe the story has to be important enough for you to want to tell. The length, everything else now doesn't matter, I think.
If I may add, so I mean, I think if I was starting now, I'd be pretty terrified. It's a crazy time, I think, to start off as a filmmaker or a storyteller, only because of the amount of noise, right? Like earlier, there were fewer people being given the opportunity to say what they wanted to, and so the attention was a lot more concentrated. But the good thing also is that now everyone has the mic, and you can really choose to tell the story, and you don't have to wait for a big studio to greenlight your thoughts. You just pick up your phone and you get that conversation going. So it's an incredibly exciting time. And also this idea of, how would you feel or where would you start right now? The thing is, I'm sure when Raja started filmmaking, Q started filmmaking, I started filmmaking, the landscape was constantly changing anyway, It's just that right now we are reacting to the fact that, hey, for the last 10 years of my career, it's been a certain way, and now it feels like it's really shifting. But for people starting right now, this is their reality, right? So I think one good thing that happens is the form becomes a great filter. Like, oh, you know how people are like, oh, this video meeting should have been an email, you know? It's kind of the same filter where it's like, oh, this feature film should have just been a reel. So it's a great way to really churn out what stands out. And I think the other thing is that transmedia as an idea really market proofs you, right? So you have to be very adaptable as an artist, as a storyteller, because you can't just be like, I only make like traditional cinema. You have to be like, okay, that's not working. You know what? The industry is in the slumps. There's no funding available for that, but I still have stories to tell. So I need to be able to be open to learning and unlearning and relearning and be like, okay, let me take this idea. It would actually work so much better as a game, or it would actually work so much better as a social media experiment, and just go with that. So it's great, and it's very liberating because it market proofs you.
I'll just quickly add one point that now I started out filming. My filmmaking life began with documentaries. I was a big lover of hybrid work, etc., and always ruled the thing that documentary was dying, and we saw its death, and networks shut down, funding shut down. Across the world, we were seeing this. Okay, I've seen at least 20 really, really good documentaries about African issues. I'm just saying African, Pan-African issues. My mentor had a lot to do with that, so I got firsthand. A lot of these films weren't watched by many people. That's the problem with documentaries, right? So today, as of this moment, do you know Speed? Show Speed, the creator? Okay, if you don't know him, please figure out. He's on a 22-day, 28-country Africa visit. He's live streaming. And the impact that series has had so far in 14, 15 days is unmatched. You wouldn't find a whole 100 documentaries which could, tell this story so powerfully and impactfully and reach these people who are now reacting to this, and it's interactive. Africans are reacting outside, people who did not know anything about Africa is reacting, and I think this approach, like Maya says, okay, you can cry about what is not there anymore, but what is happening right now is also really spectacular. I think there's a lot of things to dream about.
On that note, I'm going to thank our speakers for genuinely what has been one of the most candid, enriching, and engaging discussions we've had. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, lady. Thank you, ma'am. May I please request, English died a million deaths. May I please request Harish Rao, our co-organizer, to kindly come on stage and felicitate our speakers, please.
We should do this one.
I know,
You pulled something rabbit out of the hat.
Oh, I think they want to.
May I also request you for a group picture, please? If you guys could just come ahead.